I thought I found love again at 67. I thought she was different from the rest. I gave her everything I had, and in the end, I was nothing but her fool. What looked like true love in Pattaya turned out to be the costliest mistake of my life. My name is Harold Whitman, and this is my confession. This is the truth I've been too ashamed to tell my children, too broken to admit to myself. But tonight, I'm done hiding from what happened to me in those neon-lit streets. The first time I saw Nalin, she was leaning against the bar counter, her black hair catching the purple light from the club's strobes. I'd been in Thailand for 3 months, trying to escape the emptiness that filled my house back in Ohio after Margaret died. The grief counselor said I needed to find new purpose, new connections. Travel, she said. Meet people. I never imagined I'd find myself in a Pattaya bar at my age, nursing a beer and watching girls half my age dance for men who looked just as lost as I felt. I wasn't planning to bring this story out tonight, but earlier this week, I got an email from a longtime viewer of this channel. He told me he'd been quietly watching for months, never missing a story, always listening in silence. And then finally he shared his own. Reading his words, I felt my chest tighten. First came recognition, that eerie shiver when you realize someone else has lived a version of your own nightmare. Then came anger, not at him, but at the way hope can be used against men like us. And finally, there was a deep, quiet sadness because I knew how heavy it is to carry that kind of shame, the kind you don't want to admit even to your own family. That email reminded me why I sit down here and speak like this, late at night. To the man who wrote it, thank you. And to all of you watching right now, thank you, too. Please, leave a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. I love seeing those messages come in from every corner of the world. And for those who've been with me through story after story, this is my super thank you. You're the reason I can keep telling the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Please like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and join the conversation below, because tonight, I'm ready to tell you everything. Let me take you back to where it all started. You look sad, Nalini said, sliding onto the stool beside me. Her English was careful, deliberate. First time here? No, I lied. Just thinking. About what? She touched my arm lightly, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Noticed. Wanted. Human again. My wife passed away, I said. I don't know why I told her. Maybe it was the way she listened, really listened, not just waiting for her turn to speak. I'm sorry. Her eyes softened. How long? 2 years, 3 months, 12 days. The precision surprised even me. She didn't laugh or look away like most people did when I got too specific about my grief. Instead, she squeezed my arm. She was lucky to have you love her so much. That's when I knew Nalini was different. The other girls I'd seen that night were all business, all performance. But when she said those words, I saw something real behind her carefully applied makeup, something that made my chest tighten with hope I thought I'd buried with Margaret. What's your name? She asked. Harold. Harold Whitman. I'm Nalini. She smiled, and it wasn't the practiced smile I'd seen on the other faces. It was crooked, a little shy. You want to talk more, Harold? Somewhere quiet? I should have known. Should have recognized the script, but I was so hungry for someone to say my name like it mattered, to look at me like I was more than just another lonely old man with money to spend. Yes, I said, I'd like that very much. The weeks that followed felt like falling in love again. Nalini would meet me at my apartment after her shifts, still smelling faintly of cigarette smoke and perfume. We'd sit on my small balcony, looking out over the city lights, and she'd ask me about my life back home. About the students I taught, the lessons I planned, the house Margaret and I built together. You were a teacher? She'd say, curling up against my side. That's noble work. Important. It didn't feel important toward the end, I'd admit. Kids these days, they don't seem to care about history. History matters, she'd whisper. It teaches us not to repeat mistakes. The irony of those words haunts me now. But then, they felt like validation from someone who understood me in ways my own children never had. Tom and Sarah had been polite but distant since Margaret's funeral, calling dutifully every Sunday to check if I was doing okay. But Nalini asked real questions. She wanted to know what made me laugh, what kept me awake at night, what dreams I'd given up on. I started paying for her time, of course. 5,000 baht a night, sometimes more if we went out to dinner or if she needed to take care of something for her family. I told myself it wasn't transactional. I was supporting someone I cared about, helping her through a difficult period. "I don't want to do this job forever, Harold," she'd say, lying in my arms. "With you, maybe I don't have to." Those words fed something desperate inside me. The possibility that I could be someone's salvation, someone's chosen future. I'd been feeling like a burden since Margaret died, like I was just taking up space waiting to join her. But with Nalin, I felt necessary again, heroic, even. "I could take care of you," I told her one night, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "You wouldn't have to work anymore." She was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she rolled over to face me, her eyes bright in the darkness. "You mean that?" "I mean it, Harold," she whispered, and kissed me softly. "You make me believe in good men again." I should have questioned why she needed to believe in good men again. Should have asked about the bad ones. But I was too intoxicated by the idea of being her good man, her rescue, her reason to hope. The next morning I wired $3,000 to cover her rent and what she said were debts to the bar owner. It felt like an investment in our future, not a payment for services rendered. The transformation was immediate. Nalini stopped working the bars. She spent entire days with me, cooking in my small kitchen, teaching me basic Thai phrases, planning trips to temples and markets I'd never have visited alone. "You're learning my culture?" she'd say proudly. "That means you're serious about us." Serious. The word thrilled me. When was the last time anyone had accused me of being serious about anything except grading papers and managing my grief? I started imagining scenarios I'd thought were closed to me forever. Marriage. Maybe not the traditional kind, given our circumstances, but some kind of formal commitment. A small house outside the city where we could build something together. Perhaps even, in my most foolish moments, the possibility of being needed by someone for the rest of my life. "My mother is very sick," Nalini told me one afternoon as we walked through a local market. "The doctors say she needs surgery, but we don't have money." "What kind of surgery?" I asked. "Her heart." Nalini's voice cracked. "She raised me alone after my father left. I can't lose her, Harold." Without hesitation, I transferred $8,000 to her account that night. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. This was what people who loved each other did. They took care of each other's families. They stepped up in crises. Margaret and I had done the same for her parents when they got older. "Thank you," Nalini whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You saved her life. You saved mine too." But even as she cried in my arms, something nagged at me. A conversation I'd overheard between her and another Thai woman at a coffee shop the week before. They'd been speaking rapidly in Thai, but I'd caught fragments. Numbers. Amounts. The word farang, foreigner, repeated several times with what sounded like laughter. When I'd asked Nalini about it later, she'd dismissed it casually. "Just girl talk, Harold, nothing important." The first real crack appeared 3 months in. I'd been trying to reach her all day, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Finally, around midnight, she called back. "Sorry, baby," she said, but her voice sounded different. Distracted. "I was with my sick aunt. She had emergency." "I thought your mother was the one who was sick." "Yes, my mother too. My aunt also sick. Thai families, we take care of everyone." The explanation made sense, but something in her tone didn't match her words. The next day, I asked if I could meet her aunt, maybe bring some flowers or food. "No," Nalini said quickly. "She's very traditional. Doesn't want to meet foreign men. Maybe later." I started noticing other inconsistencies. Phone calls she'd take in another room speaking in hushed Thai. Errands that took hours when they should have taken minutes. Stories about her past that changed slightly each time she told them. Her age, which seemed to shift by a year or two depending on her mood. The number of siblings she had. Even basic facts about her hometown. But every time doubt crept in, she'd do something that made me feel foolish for questioning her. She'd cook my favorite meal, or suggest we visit a temple together, or simply hold my hand while we watched the sunset from my balcony. "I'm so happy with you, Harold," she'd say. "You make me feel safe." Safe. That word carried so much weight. After 43 years of marriage, I knew what it meant to be someone's safe harbor. Margaret had always said I was her anchor, her steady place in a chaotic world. If Nalini felt safe with me, then whatever inconsistencies I was noticing had to be minor. Cultural differences, language barriers, the complexity of living between two worlds. The biggest test came when she asked me to meet her family. "My mother wants to thank you," she said, "for the surgery money. She's better now, and she wants to cook for the man who saved her life." The trip to her village took 3 hours by bus. I'd never been so far from Pattaya, and I felt like an ambassador representing all Western men as we walked through the dusty streets. Children stared openly, adults whispered and pointed. I was the giant farang who'd swept their daughter away from the bars. Nalini's mother was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with deeply lined hands and a smile that reminded me of my own grandmother. She pressed her palms together and bowed when she saw me, speaking rapidly in Thai while Nalini translated. "She says you are like Buddha to our family. You brought blessing when we needed miracle." The house was smaller than my first apartment, with concrete floors and walls thin enough that I could hear every conversation in the neighboring houses. But the dinner they prepared was elaborate, clearly expensive. Too expensive, I realized, for a family that had supposedly been struggling to pay for surgery just weeks before. "Your mother looks very healthy," I said carefully to Nalini as we sat on plastic chairs outside after the meal. "Yes, the surgery worked. American doctors, very good. Your money paid for the best." But as the evening wore on, I noticed that Nalini's mother never mentioned being in the hospital, never showed me scars or spoke about recovery. When I asked directly about her heart condition, she looked confused until Nalini translated, then nodded vigorously and patted her chest. The uncle who joined us for drinks was more direct. "You very generous man," he said in broken English. "Nalini lucky girl. Many farang come, few stay, fewer give so much. How many farang has she known?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. He laughed and held up both hands, fingers spread wide. Then he closed them and opened them again. "Maybe more. Nalini, very popular girl." That night, lying on the hard mattress in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process what I'd learned. Was I really Nalini's first serious relationship, her escape from bar life? Or was I just the latest in a long line of lonely foreign men who'd convinced themselves they were special? "Harold," Nalini whispered, slipping into the room. "You're awake?" "Can't sleep," I said. She climbed in beside me, her body warm against mine. "My uncle, he talks too much when he drinks. Don't listen to him." "How many men have there been, Nalini?" She was quiet for a long moment. "You're jealous?" "I'm not jealous. I just want to understand. Before you, yes, there were others. But Harold," she turned to face me in the darkness, "they were customers. You're different. You're the one I choose." Choose. The word should have comforted me, but it felt hollow. If I was chosen, why did I feel like I was still being auditioned? Still being tested to see how much I would give, how much I would overlook, how much I would endure? But her hand found mine under the thin sheet, and her breathing deepened as she fell asleep against my shoulder. In the morning, watching her help her mother prepare breakfast, seeing the obvious affection between them, I convinced myself I was overthinking everything. This was real. Complicated, maybe, but real. The land deal came up 2 weeks later. Nalini's family wanted to buy a small plot where they could build a better house, maybe start a small business. The asking price was $15,000, but if they could put down half, the owner would finance the rest. "I want to help," I told her. "But that's a lot of money." "I know, baby. I wouldn't ask, but this is our chance, my family's chance. And maybe," she looked at me hopefully, "someday our chance too. We could build something there. Together." The together part sealed it. I liquidated part of my 400 nanak, took the penalty, and wired the money. In my mind, I was investing in our shared future. I was buying into Nalini's world, becoming part of her family's story. But after that transaction, something shifted. Nalini became busier, harder to reach. She'd disappear for entire days, claiming she was dealing with paperwork for the land purchase, or helping her mother with the business planning, or visiting sick relatives in other provinces. The explanations were always reasonable, but they were also always delivered after the fact, never in advance. Our physical intimacy became less frequent, more perfunctory. Where she'd once lingered in bed, asking me about my dreams and sharing her own, now she was often up and dressed before I woke, drinking coffee on the balcony while scrolling through her phone. "Everything okay?" I'd ask. "Of course, baby. Just busy time. Family business very complicated." I told myself this was natural. We were moving from the honeymoon phase into something more mature, more integrated with real life. Relationships required work, compromise, periods of distance, and reconnection. Margaret and I had gone through similar cycles. But Margaret had never disappeared for 3 days without returning my calls. Margaret had never looked at me with the kind of impatience I was starting to see in Nalini's eyes when I asked too many questions about where she'd been or when she'd be back. The end came suddenly, like a car accident you see in your peripheral vision but can't avoid. I hadn't heard from Nalini in 4 days. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her messages were unread. I'd walked through half the bars in Pattaya, asking if anyone had seen her, feeling more pathetic with each inquiry. Finally, I found her. She was at a rooftop restaurant I'd never been to, sharing a bottle of wine with a man who looked about my age but in better shape, better dressed, more comfortable with himself. They were holding hands across the table, and she was laughing at something he'd said, really laughing, the way she used to laugh with me in those first weeks. I stood at the entrance for what felt like hours, watching them, waiting for some explanation that would make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe it was her brother. Maybe it was a business meeting. Maybe there was some cultural context I was missing. Then she saw me. Our eyes met across the restaurant, and for a moment, her face went completely blank. Not guilty, not surprised, just empty. Like she was looking through me at something more interesting on the wall behind my head. She said something to the man, kissed him lightly on the lips, and walked toward me. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs, my mouth going dry. "Harold," she said when she reached me. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you. I was worried. You weren't answering your phone. I told you I was busy with family business." "That's family business?" I nodded toward the man, who was watching us with mild curiosity. She glanced back at him, then shrugged. "Harold, we need to talk." We found a quiet corner of the restaurant's bar. Nalini ordered herself a cocktail, didn't ask what I wanted. I sat there watching her sip her drink, trying to prepare myself for whatever was coming. "I think this isn't working," she said finally. "What isn't working?" Us. You're too intense, too jealous, too needy." The words hit like physical blows. "Needy? I thought you wanted someone who cared about you." "I do. But Harold, you suffocate me. You want to know where I am every minute. You question everything I tell you. You don't trust me." "I gave you everything," I said, my voice cracking. "The money for your mother, for the land, for rent, for everything you needed. I thought we were building something together." She looked genuinely confused. "You gave me money, yes, I appreciate that. But Harold, that doesn't mean you own me." "I never said I owned you." "No, but you act like it. Like because you pay for things, I belong to you." The accusation stung because there was truth in it. I had been thinking of our relationship in terms of investment and return. I had been expecting gratitude to transform into love, generosity to create obligation. "Who is he?" I asked, nodding toward her table companion. "A friend." "Just a friend?" "Harold, this is what I'm talking about. The jealousy, the questions. I can't live like this." "Are you sleeping with him?" She sighed, finished her drink, and stood up. "I'm going back to my table now. I think it's better if we don't see each other anymore." "Nalini, wait." I grabbed her arm, then immediately let go when I saw the flash of anger in her eyes. "Please, can we talk about this? Can we work through it?" "There's nothing to work through, Harold. I'm sorry if you thought this was more than it was. But it's over now." She walked back to her table, kissed the other man again, and didn't look in my direction for the rest of the evening. I sat at the bar for another hour, ordering drinks I didn't want, hoping she'd come back and tell me it was all a mistake, that she'd chosen me, like she'd promised. But she never looked back. And eventually, I had to accept that the conversation we'd just had was my breakup, delivered like a business transaction. Clean, final, utterly without sentiment. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life, darker even than the period after Margaret's death. At least then, I'd had good memories to sustain me. 43 years of shared history. Proof that I'd been loved completely and unconditionally. With Nalini, I had nothing but questions and receipts. I spent my days going through bank statements, adding up what I'd spent. The numbers were devastating. Nearly $30,000 in 6 months. More than I'd spent on anything except my house since Margaret died. Money that represented security, independence, the ability to age with dignity. My children started calling more frequently, worried about my sudden silence. I couldn't bring myself to tell them what had happened. How could I explain that I'd fallen in love with a bar girl half my age? That I'd given her money for surgeries that might never have happened, for land deals I'd never verified, for a future that had never been real? "Dad, are you okay?" Sarah asked during one of our Sunday calls. "You sound different." "I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired. Maybe it's time to come home." This Thailand adventure has gone on long enough, don't you think? Home. The word felt foreign. I'd sublet my house in Ohio, sold most of my furniture, burned bridges with the idea that I was starting a new life. Going back would mean admitting failure, acknowledging that I'd been a fool. But staying meant facing the truth every time I walked through Pattaya's streets. Seeing couples like Nalin and me had been, knowing now what the locals had probably known all along. That I'd been a mark, a target, another lonely farang who'd confused commerce with romance. I tried to find Nalini one more time. Not to win her back, but to understand. To get some closure that made sense of what we'd shared. I went to her old apartment building, but the landlord said she'd moved out weeks ago, leaving no forwarding address. I checked the bars where she used to work, but no one had seen her. It was as if she'd vanished entirely, or more accurately, as if she'd never existed in the first place. Finally, 3 months after our last conversation, I got a message from her. A simple text. "Harold, can we meet? I want to talk." My heart leaped with hope I thought I'd buried. Maybe she'd realized she'd made a mistake. Maybe the other man hadn't worked out. Maybe she missed what we'd had together. We met at a coffee shop near the beach, neutral territory that held no memories for us. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, her clothes more expensive. She carried herself with new confidence, like someone who'd solved a problem she'd been working on for a long time. "You look good," I said, because it was true. "Thank you. You look tired." "I am tired." We sat in awkward silence for a moment, sipping our coffee and watching tourists walk by on the beach path. "Harold," she said finally, "I want to say thank you." "For what?" "For everything. The money, the support, the time together. It helped me a lot." Helped her. Past tense. Completed transaction. "I want you to know," she continued, "that I cared about you. Really, you're a good man, but not good enough." She looked genuinely sad for a moment. "Harold, you were too much for me. Too intense, too possessive. I need my freedom." With him, his name is Eric, he's from Denmark, and yes, we're together now. The confirmation hurt less than I expected. By then, I'd had months to prepare for it. "Is he giving you money too?" "Harold, don't. I'm not judging, I just want to understand. Was any of it real?" She considered the question seriously. "It was real for me, at the time. But Harold, you wanted something I couldn't give you. You wanted me to be your wife, your companion for life. I was never going to be that for you. You said you were looking for something serious. I was, but serious doesn't mean forever. It doesn't mean exclusive. It doesn't mean giving up my independence. So what was I to you?" "You were Harold," she said simply. "You were kind and generous and lonely. You needed someone, and for a while, I liked being needed. And now I need different things. Eric understands that." I wanted to ask what Eric understood that I didn't. Whether he was giving her money, whether she was working again, whether their relationship would last longer than ours had. But I was tired of questions that led nowhere productive. "I hope you'll be happy," I said, and I meant it. "I hope you will be too, Harold. You deserve someone who can love you the way you want to be loved." She kissed my cheek, gathered her purse, and walked away. This time, I didn't watch her go. I sat in the coffee shop until closing time, thinking about what she'd said. About deserving love, about wanting things people couldn't give, about the difference between being needed and being wanted. 6 months later, I'm back in Ohio. I moved into a smaller apartment, closer to Sarah and her family. I volunteer at the local historical society teaching community education classes about Southeast Asian history. It's ironic, but my time in Thailand gave me insights into the region that my students appreciate. I don't date. I can't imagine explaining to another woman what happened to me in Pattaya, why a man my age thought he could find love by paying for it. But I'm not bitter, not exactly. I'm sadder but wiser, as they say. I understand now what I was really looking for in Thailand. It wasn't love, not in the way Margaret and I had loved each other. It was the feeling of being essential to someone, of mattering in ways that went beyond blood relation or professional obligation. I wanted to be chosen, to be someone's first priority, to feel necessary again. Nalin gave me that feeling, for a while. The fact that I had to pay for it doesn't make the feeling less real, just more expensive than I could afford. She wasn't evil, wasn't deliberately cruel. She was just a young woman trying to improve her circumstances, and I was a resource that could help her do that. When I stopped being useful and started being demanding, she moved on to someone who could give her what she needed without requiring more than she wanted to give. The money I lost hurts, but it's not the deepest injury. What hurts most is the realization that I'd been fooling myself about what I had to offer. I thought my love, my devotion, my willingness to sacrifice would be enough to inspire the same feelings in someone else. I thought generosity could create love, that need could become want. What I learned in Pattaya is that love can't be purchased, no matter how much you're willing to spend. It can only be given freely, by someone who genuinely wants to give it. Everything else is just expensive companionship, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're honest about what you're buying. If I had to do it over again, I'd probably still go to Thailand. I'd still be lonely, still be looking for connection. But I'd be more honest about what I was seeking and what I was willing to accept. I'd pay for companionship without expecting it to transform into love. I'd enjoy what was offered without demanding more. Most importantly, I'd remember that being alone isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Being with someone who doesn't really want you there, who's counting the cost of every smile and measuring the return on every conversation, that's worse than loneliness. That's humiliation disguised as love. My name is Harold Whitman, and this is my confession. What I thought was love in Pattaya was the costliest mistake of my life, but it taught me something valuable about the difference between being wanted and being needed, between love and transaction, between companion and commodity. I hope my story might help someone else avoid the same expensive education. The neon lights of Pattaya are beautiful from a distance, but up close, they're just artificial illumination covering something much more complicated. I should have remembered that before I let myself believe that what looked like love could ever be anything more than a very convincing performance. But maybe that's the most expensive lesson of all, learning to tell the difference between what's real and what's just good lighting.